The 18 million people heading to the polls to choose new members of parliament and regional councils. We're now joined by a senior researcher at the Afro-Middle East, the think tank Afro-Middle East Centre, Ebrahim Deen. Ebrahim, thanks very much indeed for joining us. Always good to talk to you.
Thanks for having me, and the pleasure is always mine as well.
All right, so the Moroccans go to elections tomorrow. Why is the ruling party concerned at this stage? What has changed since the last election?
So there's a few things. One is, as you were saying, there's 31 parties. Job creation has been an issue. The coronavirus has affected the economy. But more than that, the election system has actually been changed. And so you are right to say 18 million people are going to the polls, because even if 5 million people vote, the result is calculated on 18. The seat proportionality is calculated as per 18 million voters. It's the only system in the world that works on voter registry, a voter roll rather than voting itself. And so it's impossible for a party to get over 100 seats, which means it will most likely lose its power. That's the one issue. Two is, what power does it actually have? As you were saying as well, most of the powers are controlled by the king, and the government is actually, as many say, it's just there to contain, constrain, and ensure that citizens' anger is put towards the government rather than the king. And three, regionally, there has been a shift away from Islamist parties, and the king himself prefers the authenticity and modernity movement, PEM. And so, funding has been given to parties such as PEM and the Rally for National Independence, the RNI, and these parties are supported more by the king, and so that's the Justice and Development Party, the PJD, is concerned with all these factors.
What prompted the change in the election system? Is it about trying to deal with the ruling party? What is it? Because, in most democracies in the world, you've got to show up on the day to vote, and what your thoughts are on the day will matter. But I'm seeing surveys that are suggesting that as much as 64% of the people might not bother showing up.
So yes, there's two big factors that prompted the change. One is the turnout. It's unlikely that there will even be a 40% turnout. If there is a 40% turnout, it will be quite surprising, because many just realize that the parliament has very little power. The king can dissolve them at any time. And two is the fact that Moroccan elections itself is a spectacle. It's not about power. It's more about becoming closer or getting patronage networks within, the kingdom. And so basically, the kingdom doesn't want a powerful party that can challenge it. And so these rules are specifically meant to actually contain parties, so they have to form coalitions to weaken them vis-a-vis the monarch. And so, it's both practical in terms of turnout, but also practical in terms of, the existential threat, in the sense of the existential reason for the Moroccan parliament, which is actually just to dissuade citizen anger and actually to contain and constrain citizens rather than allow them an actual vote and voice in governance.
All right. You've mentioned the monarchy several times now. Wasn't the constitution changed in, was it 2011, following the February 20th movement, to try and get towards constitutional monarchy? Did that not happen, or was it just cosmetic then?
Very cosmetic. And in fact, one of the changes, which was a youth quota that was put in 2011, officially expires as per this election. So it was, the Moroccan monarchy talks about incremental change. And basically, for every change that gives the citizens more power, there's a change to actually try and ensure that this power can't actually be used or instrumentalized in any way. And so, since 2011, the monarchy has actually got more power. And this is why we're seeing, turnout in elections become lower and lower and lower.
What do the people want?
It's unlikely that there's going to be a criticism or a rebellion or a revolution against the king. The parties do a good job of dissuading it, and most of the parties actually need the king's blessing to participate. So that's the one thing. Two is the citizenry, are seeking more economic changes and economic issues. Unemployment is high, debt to GDP is high. The coronavirus, as it has impacted many other economies on the continent, has impacted the Moroccan economy. So, it's all more to do with economics rather than political openness at the moment. But, in saying so, there was the Great Rift Valley protests in 2019, and there is still issues in the Western Sahara. Control, the Moroccan-controlled parts of Western Sahara. So, those political issues are there, but, on the whole, it's more economic changes that, the populace wants to see. And that, the populace hopes that they can vote, a different party would do differently. But at the end of the day, the big decisions are made by the king, and it's actually just an attempt to actually temper or damper, citizen anger.
Do you think that the king is failing to read the temperature on the ground? 2011, 2012, we saw those February 20th movement demonstrations. They could easily happen again.
They could. In 2011, 2012, it was larger though, because there was regional issues in support of of uprisings and democracy and popular participation. We've actually seen a redress regionally since then. So Egypt has gone back to dictatorship. Tunisia is on its way to dictatorship. Yemen is in war. Libya is in civil war. So, the king reads the mood in the sense that regional monarchs are now stronger than ever. And so it's unlikely that unless there's, a movement that is wide and broad enough to confront him, his powers, the king just does basically just incorporates more parties into the patronage system and actually basically weakens and fragments political participation and political parties in the country. And that just means that there's no real threat to his rule. The real two parties, the leftist parties that actually would have posed a threat, aren't able to run in elections. They're banned.
Whilst all of this is happening, there is the question of Western Sahara, the Sahrawi Democratic Republic, the Polisario Front. Does it matter who wins this election, or their cause remains still a thorn in the flesh of any party that wins these local regional elections?
Yes, one is the king's legitimacy would be severely impaired if anything happened in that region. So, it's unlikely that any change in power or change in party would actually lead to a change in policy. And two is the Sahrawi issue in Morocco. Most Moroccans support the king on the Sahrawi issue. And so, it's unlikely that they will want to confront his control over or his autonomy and autonomous-based solutions over Western Sahara.
So this election, will it deliver a majority in parliament, or are we looking at coalition politics going forward?
It's coalition politics, and in fact, it's going to be a more fragmented coalition. Already there's a coalition. The ruling party only controls 125 of the 395 seat threshold at the moment, and it's unlikely that it's actually most probably is going to weaken because of now the seats are calculated based on a voter roll rather than voting itself. And so it's mathematically it's impossible for any party to get over 100 seats, which means there's going to be a coalition now with more parties, more people entering the patronage network, and more people becoming dependent on this patronage network, and then fearful of actually questioning, the real source of power, and more citizen disillusionment, with politics itself.
Ebrahim Deen, we'll leave it there, and hopefully we'll catch up with you as the results starts coming through, and just to see what it all means. But thank you so much for your insights ahead of the polls tomorrow.
Thanks for having me.
All right, that's senior researcher, Afro-Middle East Centre, Ebrahim Deen. Moroccans go to the polls tomorrow, and it looks like it's going to be a hung parliament that force coalition politics even more. They're divided as we speak, but it looks like it's set to be even more going forward.